Welcome,
All right.
everyone. Christal.
Welcome, everyone. So nice to see some familiar faces and some new faces. We may have more people joining in. We had a couple people that had something come up today. Also, they were actually on the other side of the world, so the time was a little bit bizarre for them anyways. So we're going to get started. So today we're going to be talking about, it's a live workshop that we're doing, and we're going to be talking about, the title of our workshop is called The Future is Whole Human Connection. And so we are living in times when it is evident that a lot of people are under duress, they're stressed out, there is so much going on that's causing us to feel more disconnected, or it's really easy to feel disconnected and feel like things are beyond our control. So we believe at Whole Human Coaching that we can reclaim our humanity in life and work and that's how we are going to actually be able to affect change. We believe in the ability for coaching to not to help us and as individuals to gain perspective, but it's because we're actually part of a bigger whole. It and that's our vision with coaching, and that's the kind of people that we work with. And today, we're excited to have you be part of us looking at what it is to actually start to use some coaching in your leadership and in your life, and for you to have usable tools and to experience the power of coaching firsthand.
Mm.
So I am going to first I'll introduce myself, and then I will keep going. So my name is Christal Duncan. My last name is technically Earl, but I just got a 10-year passport, so that's going to be a process. But I'm reclaiming my name. I have been a professional coach for the last 10 years. I'm a founder and co-founder of various different social change organizations, nonprofits, and businesses. And I am coming to you from Toronto, from the Dish with One Spoon territory.
Lovely. Colin.
Hey everyone, my name is Colin Kingsmill. I have been in coaching for about 6 years now, I guess. And prior to that, I was in international real estate management consulting, and before that in banking in Switzerland. But forgive me for that. So for that past sin. Thank you. And I'm coming to you from Halifax, not Halifax, Mahone Bay.
Yeah, close to Halifax. I'm Carol Vickers. I use the pronoun she and her, and I have the pleasure, the absolute honor of living on the Lekwungen speaking territory, the peoples of Esquimalt and Songhees nations. And I have been coaching for about 18 years. So it's been a long time since I took up the profession of coaching, which felt like I was just coming home to who I was, which was really a wonderful thing. I have the delight of actually working with these other two humans, and us as whole human coaching is probably the first iteration of me being engaged in a productivity, a partnership that just feels so right. So we're delighted to be doing this together today. So welcome. Thank you for being here. One of the things that I like to do to begin a workshop is to start with a couple of quotes. The first one comes from Daniel Goleman, who wrote the book Primal Leadership. And he says, to connect with the kind of vision that can move a culture towards resonance, or emotionally intelligent leaders start by looking inside at what they feel, think, and sense about their organizations. So we're going to be looking at this from a couple of different perspectives, but one is, what if you are leading an organization? What if you are considering how to use this idea of coaching in your organization? The other one is a little tongue-in-cheek. It's from Edna St. Vincent Millay, who was a Pulitzer Prize winning poet who unfortunately died in 1950 at a relatively young age. And she said this was quoted as something, a letter that she wrote. She said, "Please give me some good advice in your next letter. I promise not to follow it." So it points to what we typically do as human beings with advice, which is what we're going to distinguish from coaching today. So leading courageously in this world without falling into giving advice is considering that we're at a time, and as Christal, as you said, in the world when not just leaders, but all of us are being called upon to step up. We're here today to play with some of ideas and some tools that can make a difference right away. The whole human coaching model that we base our work on is structuring a coaching conversation, and it builds on principles and concepts that have been around for many, many years. Amazing thinkers and teachers that have influenced all of us have influenced this way of coaching. One of the foundational principles for me is that of appreciative inquiry. It is the principle, in a nutshell, that what we put our attention to grows. So there's a lot of study that backs this up. And it is the visual that I love about it is that we as humans are actually heliotropic. And what that means is, like sunflowers, our attention follows the sun. So if what we're putting our attention to, we move towards. So a sunflower, literally a field of sunflowers, will move their beautiful big heads across the sky to follow the sun. So we want to invite that there's the principle of that we can follow some positive aspects and make a difference. There's a lot of scientific background to this. One of the wonderful things is the advances in brain imaging technology has allowed us to take pictures of what's happening when things are happening to people. And it's allowed some researchers to discover there are actually two networks in our brain that in some ways act in opposition to each other. The task positive network, or TPN for short, is activated when we engage in cognitive tasks. So these are the things like perception, it's motor control, problem solving, logical analysis. It's a lot of what we do in our day, and certainly what we do in our work a lot. But it tends to produce stressful feelings. It activates the sympathetic nervous system. But we tend to spend a lot of time here, especially in our work environments. The other piece is the default mode network, DMN, and this enables big picture thinking. It's all about engagement and motivation and stress regulation and our social and relationship awareness. And it is associated, when the research is played out, with positive emotion, with trust, and feeling supported. And we've done a lot of conversations over this last month about trust. So this is the aspect of this domain, this opposing domain, that when it is active allows you to feel supported. So when I said they're opposing, it's in the sense that when one network is active, it inhibits the other. So analytic thinking fires up your task positive network, but it turns off the default mode network. On the other hand, empathetic thinking, so thinking with empathy, activates the DMN and suppresses the TPN. So I wonder, just quickly, if you can think of a situation where your default mode network is activated. What might bring that into focus for you?
I think when I hear stories that somebody's sharing, whether it's online on a post or in life talking with people, I think stories bring out your empathetic side and you connect better that way.
That's a great example. Yeah, storytelling. Thank you.
Just
Welcome,
wanted to
Annie.
just wanted to make a quick note for everybody that there's the PDF that we sent out. I've put the link in the chat as well if you want to have it there. Sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to make sure everybody understood.
Any other examples when
Recently,
Go
I was
ahead,
gonna
Jeannie.
say, recently I have, I don't know what it was. I feel like a couple of weeks ago, my friends were texting me that they were going through a really hard time and asking if I could make space for them. And I think that that's like whenever you're making space for someone else, there's this moment where you have to kind of where you have to like be in your empathetic body, if that
Mm,
makes sense. Like I call it a body because I feel like you have to be so conscious about being empathetic. I think some of it comes natural to us because we're human beings, but there's this other part about like, am I actively listening to what this person is saying? Am I registering that? Am I being present with them too?
mhm.
So
Great. Yeah, when we're connecting with other people. Mm. Colin or Crystal?
Well, I actually think that also when for us, the default network when you're holding space for someone is present, but it's also, you also can sense it. You may not be able to put your finger on it or define it when you're on the other end and someone is not holding that space for you.
Oh,
When
yeah.
they're, and everybody's experienced those kind of conversations when someone's rushing you or finishing your sentences or interrupting you, or like you can see that they're like sitting like this ready to get their thoughts or their opinion in on it. And it takes, you use such a great, that was such a great description, Gina. It robs you of the ability to feel like you're in a
Mm,
shared space. You all of a sudden feel like someone's encroaching completely on your space, but you can't quite understand how it's happening.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I guess the only thing I would add is and maybe it's not really connected, but Gina made me think of it, is remembering that, and that we're all one again, and we live in this world, um, thanks a lot to social media and kind of all the technology that we're presented with today. We live in this world that is so easy to become disconnected from, right? So you don't even want to hold the space. You don't know you're holding it. You don't recognize it. We are so bombarded by distraction, I think,
Oh,
that
so true.
in even those real stories, like Brittany was saying, like stories seem so hard to have real ones these days.
Good
Anyway,
point. Well,
yeah,
it's
go
also,
ahead, Gina. Oh,
yeah,
Gina
Gina.
just raised her
Oh,
hand.
sorry, please.
I
Go
had a
ahead.
question
Mm,
about where social media as a tool rests in
oh,
this conversation.
good.
And
Right.
it was Brittany that made me think about this because there's so many stories on social media that are like striking this empathetic nerve.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I wanted to ask, like, from your perspective, Carol, like, where does social media as
Right.
a tool sit?
Well, it's a really good question because it can serve both purposes. And it could remind us of our humanity, but it could also, as to your point, Colin, overwhelm us and take us out of being able to connect because it feels so impersonal when we respond.
I
Yeah.
think I think also it's for me anyway, Gina. When I'm working with somebody or speaking even to myself in my own head, I'm always trying to remember that yin and yang, right? That on one side, it can be such an incredible connector for humanity and for people and for sharing and for stories. And the other hand, it can be so destructive, and you see evidence of that within children and youth and sort of all the mental health challenges that they're going through. Well, everybody is, but um, so I think it's a question of understanding that it is a yin and yang, and then having an acute awareness of it. So
Mm,
if you are going down a path of empathy and humanity and love, you fill yourself up. If you're going down the other path, and sometimes you don't even know you're going there, it is a little bit like, you have to recognize that it's like eating a box of chocolates or junk food. It is, it's just it's awareness
mm,
and being yeah being able to recognize which side of that yin and yang that you're on. Is it filling you up, or is it emptying it out?
so
I also
important.
think that social media just is, right. It is a tool, and a tool is neutral. A tool is just in the hands of the person who's wielding the tool.
Mhm.
So there's all kinds of things that are we take into consideration, everything from the algorithms that are beyond our control. Um, to the fact that it is a call to a return to humanity, because to be connected and know what's important to us helps us filter,
Mhm.
and helps us filter the messages, and also helps us recognize how we can use it in ways that are constructive, and
Right.
that build connection, right? So this is
Mhm.
actually an example of that, because everybody here has learned about this through social media.
Right.
Right? So it's not in and of itself evil. It's not, and that is not a reflection of how I feel about the people who founded the businesses and the beasts behind it, but as a tool, it is just a tool.
Exactly. And it
Brittany,
comes
did you
back
have,
to,
oh, sorry.
sorry, no, go ahead.
I just saw Brittany raised her hand a minute ago. So
Oh, sorry, Brittany.
did you want to interject and add something or say something?
Something popped into my head as you were speaking, that as a business, we're often asked or told to leverage the storytelling aspect and use that to our advantage, but then also show off in an authentic way. And sometimes it can feel a bit opposing. There's like a struggle to be honest and authentic, but not too much, maybe, or
Mhm.
downplay some things. But tell your story, show yourself behind the brand, but don't share too much. Like it's a fine line sometimes. I find
There
it can
is.
be a tightrope.
Oh,
Yeah.
It is a tightrope, but I think more and more people are hungry for the real persona or the real people behind the brand.
yes.
You know, we've worked in branding for many years, and there's been a real kind of trajectory towards that honesty and that openness, because
Mhm.
I think what we're all experiencing is the age of knowledge and the age of information.
Mhm.
So and often I don't know what business you're in, but often today clients come to the table more informed than we think.
Yes.
And so that's why we believe it's really much more important to you know jump off the tightrope and go full honest, because the days of being opaque are kind of over, and you see it in brands that have started to sort of push things that aren't real. I mean, we as people, it feels like there's power to the people now. We
Mhm.
and brands can no longer hide behind sort of a story, even if it's well articulated and authentic. So,
Yes.
yeah, jump to the other side, my friend. Is my
Well, and I think
thinking.
this is the intention of our conversation today, is to look at what are some of the tools that we can use as individuals and leaders to bring that authenticity back again. Because as what you're describing as well, is that there is a requirement for balance. And if we look at it kind of back through that research, is that we need the TPN in order to be able to work effectively in the world. So we want to encourage the activation of our default mode network, because there are so many pressures in our life. So one of the things that we know from the research is that working with a coach or coaching, being coach-like, it lights up the default mode network, because it actually starts with being listened to. So the key tool, if you ask the coaches, what's in your toolbox, they may, oh, I've got this assessment and I can do this, and I have, I can listen to you this way. But really, the tool is our listening. That we put 100% of our listening into another human being, it activates the default mode network. And when we follow that up with a question that is about their strengths or about something that they're proud of, people become less defensive and they open up again, impacting which domain we're in our brains. And we know that it happens that it's easier to like or trust people when they're talking about their best experiences, their deepest values. This is the authenticity, because it's about really listening for people's aspirations. what do they truly want? And when in a conversation we get to reconnect with our values, what happens is we become, as individuals, more resilient. So all of this just feeds back to how can we be better human beings and create what Daniel Goleman calls emotional resonance, which is when one person starts to experience the same emotions as another. So that is where we begin to bond. And it only happens, I believe, when we are being authentic, when we are telling our true story, when we recognize that we're getting the truth from somebody else. So that all brings us back to this place where we can experience positive emotions. The other side of it, which we drop into most of the time, is problem solving. Because that focus, if you've ever worked with someone or someone who thinks they have to have the answers for everything that you bring to them, it emphasizes that we are being judged, and we become self-conscious when people are offering us advice, or as Edna Vincent Millay says, thank you, I'll just forget it. I'll just ignore that. And that's a challenge. We don't want to be having conversations where we're being ignored. But coaching, by contrast, actually evokes a sense of safety. Now, we know that we can't necessarily promise safe space in any place that we are, but that idea that we can begin to hold a space that could be safe for other human beings, that's where we get to encourage new ideas. That's where we begin to scan our environment for possibilities instead of problems. So what we're doing today is a training that is designed around the whole human coaching model. And it allows for a structure to a conversation, because that's the difference in just a casual interaction and a coaching conversation, is there's a bit of a structure. So this is intended, we're intending it for engaging you as leaders and individuals. You may manage human beings. We all interact with human beings, and people who are looking for new ways to work with their teams. So in this model, there are 4 steps. It is focus, co-create, innovate, and the last one is two-barreled. It's commitments and results. So it offers a place. This coaching model provides a space for a whole conversation and creates a structure for it. So today we're going to focus on focus. We're going to begin at the beginning, because in our experience, the potential for a coaching conversation, which can move an issue or a challenge or a problem forward, it's increased by the intention of the conversation. So it requires something purposeful. So it begins by asking permission. So the experience that we have had over the last number of years in coaching is that if we begin by asking permission, it sets the stage for something that isn't just a regular conversation. Because we all have day-to-day conversations. We all have them on the fly. We often have them in a way that we're not prepared for. What we've observed is when you ask permission to have a dialogue in a purposeful way, people interact differently. It sets the stage and allows for a change of state. So all of a sudden, instead of just chit chat, what's the weather like? Or, what happened with the power in Ottawa? We're having a conversation that is intentional and purposeful. And as a leader, we begin to shift away from a directive or a critical tone to a request for permission to coach. Something happens to open a really inviting space. I think it might be described as that shift from TPN to DMN in our brains. We're prepared for something else. We're open. We're available. It's kind of like preparing your garden to plant seeds. You have to do a little bit of work first. You have to get your hands dirty. Once permission is granted, once there's an agreement to have a conversation, the next question under focus of a coaching conversation is, what would you like to talk about? Seems simple, right? Seems like a really, really easy thing to do. But what it does is it allows the other person, we call them the client in a coaching conversation, to know that you are available to listen. Because then they have the freedom to talk about anything they want to talk about. But you're being clear that what you're both talking about is a key factor to a worthwhile conversation. So focus is this foundation where we ask permission and we begin by asking what people want to talk about. You know, part of what occurs, sorry, I'm just flipping my pages here because I was out of order. When you ask someone, what would you like to talk about today? You're going to hear something. And this is where stories come in, Brittany, because most often people will tell you a story. And you, as the person listening or the coach in this, we're going to put you all in coach role right now. You're going to be listening, because we're going to have an opportunity to practice this, for keywords or phrases. Words that have energy or enthusiasm or an emotion to them. It might not always be positive. It might be something that's sad or stressful. But you leave room to allow the story to be told. And my invitation as you take on this exercise is to be listening for the values and strengths that your client is sharing. So listen to them through the context of what values they may be expressing in their story. And the important piece is that you're going to be observing without influencing the agenda. So it's an interesting challenge that we're going to put forward to you. Once the person has come up in a conversation with what's on their mind, in a coaching conversation, you're going to repeat it back. So there's clarity about what you're talking about. Now, we don't always have time for these kind of conversations. There's a lot of things that happen really quickly in the workplace. It may be that you're chatting back and forth on Teams or in Slack. You may be passing someone in the hallway if you're in a workplace. Some of us are actually back in workplaces again. But what is that unscheduled piece can actually also be a coaching conversation. Part of this learning is to invite you to pick up on the energy of a communication. When being in coach mode might really be of being of service. Because there's a lot of times that we have to work back on that TPN mode of our brains. We're passing information quickly. We need to get something answered. We have a task that has to be completed. But listen as well, because part of what you're going to hear, especially when you're listening really deeply, is the stress or strain that is in their voices. We're all experiencing it. There's no question about it. It comes from our interactions with social media. It comes from the deluge of emails that we get every day. I was coaching someone a week or so ago, a while ago. She had a boss, a manager, that fired off 4 emails in 10 minutes. Boom, 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 boom. And it kind of got more strident each one. There was more exclamation points and more question marks, and there was more of this back and forth. And she felt like she should be compassionate about his situation. They both work in healthcare. But it just caused her upset. She just got closed right off. So we're all in this world of rapid, ridiculous communications. But there's an opportunity when you can to shift into a more coach-like mode of being. And that can counter the stress. So I want to just invite you to practice. So we have 5 participants. So Christal, can you pair with somebody?
I can, or we can allow for a couple more minutes and allow a group of 3 and then a group of 2. Would that be okay?
we can definitely
That
do
way
this.
everybody gets to. Okay.
Yeah, so everybody gets to do it. So here's the invitation. We're going to put you in a breakout room, and we invite you to actually do this with your camera down. If we were doing it in person, I'd have you sit in chairs back to back so you can't see each other. One person tells a story, just a short story, 2 minutes max. It can be something simple, what you had for dinner last night, where you're going on your next vacation. It doesn't have to be meaningful. It doesn't have to be important. Just tell a story for about 2 minutes, which many of you who are storytellers will realize that's actually quite a long period of time. The listener's job is to listen without comment. That's the hard part. Don't interject, don't respond, don't offer anything to go along with it. Let the person tell their story for about 2 minutes. When they stop, repeat back to them the highlights that you heard. So just the simple highlights. But the first piece of it is to listen, just listen. Then we'll ask you to switch. So we're going to give you about 10 minutes. Actually, we can give probably about 15 minutes so that everyone gets a chance to do that in the trio. Does that work, Christal? Does that make sense, Colin?
It's totally fine. Yeah. Yeah. 12. We'll check in. We'll check in after 12. We'll check in after 10 minutes. How about we'll check in and people can just let us know. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Or
Okay.
just come back when you're done. Why don't we just say that? We'll
Yeah, you can come back to the main room when you're done.
back into the main room when you're done.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Okie dokie. I am going to just randomly go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Is that all right?
Sure.
Ooh,
Okay.
Colin, destiny is in your hands. What are you going to do with all this power?
I don't know. There is no rhyme or reason to any of this. It's just there's 3 people on the top row for me anyway, and then a couple of people on the bottom row, Heather and Wendy. So that's how it's going to happen, and I apologize in advance if no, it's going to work. It'll
Sure.
be great. Okay.
Okay.
Enjoy.
Open the rooms. Thank
Bye.
you.
Great. Okay, let's hear from who was the 2-person room.
That
Heather,
was us, I
Heather,
believe.
oh, okay.
Yeah,
Cool. So how was it?
it was amazing. I discovered Heather's beautiful business. It's called Paper and Wings. I'm a Instagram follower of Heather's of now. Highly recommend everybody else to check it out. Heather, sorry, what am I supposed to say in this?
Just what was it like for you to just listen to actually sit and just listen to someone?
It was amazing.
Yeah.
You know, I discovered a new brand and company that is really cool. So I thought it was a good experience.
Cool. Heather, what was your experience in that?
Yeah, same experience here. I really appreciate purposefully listening. Because when you have the conversation, it kind of goes back and forth. But to sit there and actually listen the whole time, you're taking in way more. Obviously learned about a fabulous company as well. But I like the process. It was really different for me because I'm a talker. So it was nice to sit back and hear and listen deeply, which was nice.
Cool. Thank you. Okay, room 2. What was going on over there?
We didn't get to finish.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, well.
But that's okay. It's okay because I feel like we got the gist.
We got the gist.
Two people
Okay.
went through, so we
Yeah.
heard it.
Okay, cool. So what was a takeaway for you from that then?
I thought it was really lovely to hear somebody else's story. And I'm sorry I didn't get to hear both. I really struggled with in reply not wanting to like take it further or like be like, oh, me too, and this has happened in my life. And it's like automatically I wanted to like launch into that and try and just like hold myself, rein it in a little bit. But it was really nice to just stop and listen quietly and let that be absorbed.
Wow.
Yeah,
Christopher.
I find the act of like we're all we're all constantly kind of communicating from our this very particular from ourselves, but the act of listening kind of is less about self and more about kind of community, in the sense it ceases to be individualistic. You bounce kind of, when you hear a story, you kind of focus it through your own lens, but it is kind of this inherent kind of sharing that happens. You're open to this idea that that we're sharing, we're sharing, kind of experiencing what's going on in this bizarre world. It's just a lovely practice.
Mm,
Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah.
It reminded me of, I've been getting into this habit or this practice of thinking of the thoughts that or the reactions that I'm having in my brain as like a toddler. Like sometimes like and I have a lot of little like cousins, so I maybe this is why I'm like drawing this this parallel, but sometimes like they just get distracted with different things, and you have to try your best to like bring them back. And as I was listening, I was like trying to get my brain to like bring myself back. Brittany, when you were talking about trees and how they communicate, I was like, oh my God, have you heard about mycelium? And like my brain just like went off on a tangent about like this documentary that I saw and how it changed my life, because now I know that trees talk to each other. And I was like, you don't have to be over there. Like the purpose of this is that you're listening to Brittany, like come back.
Mm.
Like come back to listening to Brittany, and some of it was like, okay, I had to like slow down, really listen to like,
Yes.
even to the point of like, how is Brittany pronouncing this word? And like trying to ground myself into like what you were saying, because my brain wanted to like go somewhere else with that. So
Oh, so
Ooh, that's a great and poignant point for us. Thank you, Gina. So Carol, why don't we take, that's actually such a great step onto what we're about to talk about.
it is, because inquiry is purposeful.
Mhm.
So when you're listening, the next step is actually inquiring. So that's the part we didn't get to practice. So that's the next piece in looking at the model, is that you get to ask questions. And I know that's the impulse that we often have, is we want to know more. And I've shared with you that I coach from the perspective of appreciative inquiry, which for a lot of people is really like the rose-colored glasses. They think that's what it is. It's all about appreciation. It's all that kind of toxic positivity, but it's not as Pollyanna as you would think. Some of the research, again, looking at what we deal with on a day-to-day basis, is that we deal with crises. And that's one of the things that, as we look at the pressures that we have, we can look around and there's any number of them: personal, corporate, so societal. We're engaged in a continuous reel of crisis. There's a woman named Petra Kunkel, who is the executive director of the Collective Leadership Institute. And she wrote this about how we handle crises, because there's some certain things. First, they come unexpectedly by the nature of it. Second, we tend to ignore the beginnings of them. So when you think about that, when the crisis is on your horizon, the first reaction we have is often to look away. We don't want to see it. Third, we then fight them. It's like, oh, that isn't that bad. Or that, no, let's look for something else. And the fourth is we finally surrender. And so when we're in that space of surrendering to a crisis, there's a fifth level, which is inquiry. And inquiry is the best way to handle uncertainty, the uncertainty that a crisis causes. So engaging in inquiry means that you have to be willing to look into what we don't know or understand, and to search for what puts a situation together, particularly if we don't like it, because the reality of a crisis is we don't like it. It goes against everything that wants us to feel safe and warm and comfortable and in a pattern. So when we're courageous to be inquiring about a crisis, we can find out what others see, and it might be different than what we see. And that gives us additional information to be able to manage when a crisis is occurring. So turning to inquiry is a way of being, not just a doing thing. So it isn't just about firing off questions, but it invites a dialogue. It invites this partnership that occurs in a coaching conversation that happens with ourselves and others. And when we deeply inquire into our life, into a situation that requires us, it requires that ability to listen, because this is about a model of being in the world where we're continuously being curious. And we have to suspend our urge to get that quick explanation or to get the right answer or take the time. Because one of the most powerful tools as you're beginning a coaching conversation, whether it is just with a colleague or whether you choose to do some professional coach training, is the power of silence, the power of a pause. Because when you're excuse me, when you realize what happened when you were listening or being listened to by someone who was silent, there's so much more room. There's so much more space. And inquiring, when we break it down that way, is what we can understand. And some of what we need is time. So one of the things that happens in coaching is that we often ask a question as coaches, Colin and Christal, I'm sure you've done this, that's hard to answer for someone. And it asks the person that you're inquiring with to go beyond their current interpretation and to take a fresh look at something. So inquiry is the partner of listening. It can transform things. It can transform our tendency to listen only to what we already know and to overcome the kind of stuckness that we have to conform to what our memories have or what our patterns have. So a coaching question that is offered after listening really perturbs things. It provokes something. And that language is quite deliberate. When you look at appreciative inquiry, there is something called a provocative proposition. So you're asking people to consider what else. And when we do that for another, some other type of perception occurs. We get to go beyond what we thought we knew. So it's an opportunity for our brains to be looking in a different way. So the structure of this model, which is focus, which is inquiring and listening, co-creating, which is working with new ideas or possibilities, innovating, which is developing actions from those ideas, and commitment, it naturally leads to results as the end of a conversation. And it's something we all need to be able to move things forward in the workplace, in our lives. So I would like to offer the opportunity for someone to have a coaching experience. And I am willing to coach you for a few minutes. We probably have 15 or so. Ooh, Gina, your hand went up first. So what we'll do is
Wendy's hand went up too.
thank you, Wendy, as well. But Gina, I saw yours first, so we'll go with that. My invitation is for everyone other than Gina and I just to take your cameras down and to make sure that you are muted. And I'm just going to change my view, Gina, so that I can just see you and me. Okay.
I
And
will
we're
do
going to
the
take,
same thing.
okay. I'm going to take about 15 or 20 minutes, if that's okay with you.
Mhm.
Oh, I'd just like to take a breath to shift gears, if that's all right. Thank you, Gina. Could I have permission from you to have a coaching conversation?
Yes.
Okay. What would you like to talk about in our brief time together?
When my hand went up, I was like, I don't know what I want to talk about, but I have a lot of things to talk about. I recently, I guess I want to talk about my capacity to socialize in
Mm.
like networking events and what that looks like for me right now. Now that I'm like, I've transitioned out of my job, and it's just, it feels like I'm in a different body. So when I show up to these networking events, I don't know. I think I struggle to like understand how I'm showing up differently than before, because I feel
Mhm.
like there's been a shift, and yeah, I'll
Okay.
pause there. Mhm.
Thank you. There was a phrase there that just struck me, which was being in a different body.
Mhm.
So our conversation is going to be about socializing in a networking kind of environment. And I heard also the word struggle.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely a struggle.
Okay. And if we could have just an incredible outcome in 15 minutes, what would you like to be different at the end of our conversation?
Perhaps to feel more grounded in how I approach these networking opportunities.
Mhm.
Mhm.
What does being more grounded feel like in your body?
That's a crazy question. Because I think it looks very different. I think what I'm asking for now, like as I'm scanning myself right now,
Mhm.
is like a perspective, perhaps. It's like I feel grounded when I know why I'm going to a place
Mm.
and what I want it to, what am I seeking there? And I
Okay.
think I've attended perhaps like this is so prominent in my mind because this last couple of this past weekend, I attended like two very different social events with the same group of people.
Mhm.
And it just took me by surprise. Like there was a lot of stuff going on. And I think I just had forgotten that I'm the kind of person that I show up to places and I'm very aware or become very aware of all of the dynamics that are moving on
Mhm.
the surface and below it. And I don't think I made enough room for myself to emotionally recuperate from both of those experiences.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Wonderful. So we're going to have this conversation about the experience when you're there and walk away with a sense of being more grounded. A different perspective is what I heard. Does that make
Mm-hmm.
sense?
Yes.
Okay. As you said at the beginning that you feel like you're almost in a different body. And there were two experiences this weekend with very different environments.
Mm-hmm.
Which body felt more familiar or comfortable?
The body that I was in when I left those events.
Okay.
Like it wasn't it was so weird because I've always struggled with networking because I'm a person of color and I feel like in the United States there's always this power dynamic, this play that's going on when you're a person of color and you're entering a space that is predominantly white. But what was different about these two events was that the majority of the people there were Dominican, of
Mhm.
Dominican descent.
Mhm.
But there was very much this sense of like, we are a tight circle and you're the outcast.
Mhm.
And perhaps in another version of this or in previous networking events, I hadn't fully been aware of how my body was responding to this.
Mhm.
Um, but now that I know more about myself and understand when I'm emotionally dysregulated and overwhelmed, I have the sense of like, oh, this feels odd. And that's what happened in these two events
Mm.
where I was so overwhelmed. So I felt so out of place
Yes.
that I had a really hard time just being present there because I was like looking out for dynamics. And I think that's what was overwhelming too, that I like knew what was happening
Mhm.
at the presentation attendance level, but also was moving underneath. Made me feel very icky in a way too. Yeah.
Mhm. that awareness that you're describing that goes beyond the surface. Is there a time when that has been really useful for you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it's like one of those powers with like a double-edged sword.
Mm,
I'm a facilitator, so that comes in handy, this hypervigilance. I think if I could give it a name, comes
mhm.
in handy when I'm facilitating a group and I'm noticing certain things, or like people want to talk, but they're not really saying, what's coming out of their mouth is not really what they want to say.
Right.
I can usually pick up on those things really well. But if it's too many people, it's like my brain like fries. Like I don't even know
Mm,
what it is.
mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a difference in your role too, isn't there? When you're a facilitator, I can appreciate from over here that it's your responsibility to be aware and hypervigilant and keeping an eye on everyone.
Yeah.
And in a socializing, even a professional socializing environment, what is your role?
When you said that, I was like, yeah, that is my role there. And I think I don't know what my role is in a social event.
Mm,
And you know what's crazy about this now that we're talking about it is that when I'm in a social event and I don't know what to do, I usually go talk to the staff as if I am a staff member. I go talk to the people that are putting on the event.
mm, wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
What does that do for you?
I think it gives me a sense of security. I'm laughing because I'm like thinking about all the social events that I've gone to in the last year. And I've just hung out with the volunteers and like the people that are putting on the event.
Mm,
And I think it gives me a sense of security because I have been in that position. So I
mhm,
know what to do. I know
mhm.
what's happening. But I think oh, thanks, Wendy. And that's what it does. It just gives me security because I have
Yes,
like the peek behind the curtain kind of thing.
right. You know how it works.
Hmm.
Mm. If we were to imagine for just a moment, I'm going to play this game for just a minute.
Yeah.
Okay. That you have a different body that you can inhabit that is moving through this event with ease. What's different about that perspective?
The first thing that came into mind was like enjoying. I don't think
Mhm,
I enjoyed these two events. I came back exhausted, and I think it showed because the next day or the next couple of hours, I laid down for hours. Like
yes.
I could not get up. It was not energizing. So I hope like as I'm imagining this new body, like that it's energizing to be in a space like that,
Mm-hmm.
that I get to show up as myself despite feeling like an outcast. That
Mm,
I'm like, oh, I'm actually different than y'all, and that's a good thing, and I can lean into it. I think sometimes what happens in these social events is that I try to conform
mm,
to,
mhm.
because I'm like, I'd rather be in it than outside of it.
Yes.
The reality is that there's a cost switching to that,
Oh, yes, there
you
is.
know?
Yeah. Yeah, you had said the best part of it was leaving.
Yeah, the best part of it was actually leaving. When I sat in my car and I breathed in that like fresh air, and I was like, oh wow, there's no crazy, I'm not picking up on people looking at each other sideways
Mhm.
because something didn't go to plan,
Right.
you know?
What what happens when you're on the other side of the curtain and you're setting up an event for folks? How do you create space for them to be themselves?
It's a really good question. I try my best to meet needs and anticipate needs,
Mm,
right? So if we're at an event and I'm like curating a breakfast or something like that, right? Like I'll set the table, I'll make sure that there's water pitchers because people are gonna be thirsty. Like
Mhm.
I make sure people know where to put their belongings.
Yes.
You know, I'm like really thinking about like from start to finish, how do I make sure that people know where to find what they need?
Mhm.
Even if it's like saying, I do a lot of virtual sessions too. And sometimes I'll say, at the beginning of my session, something like, you know what you need. And if that is you need to take your camera down and walk away from your computer, please do that. Like I'm
Mhm.
not gonna hold you to that.
Mhm.
So it could be either vocal or tangible
Mhm.
ways that I do that.
Mhm. Yeah, you invite people in a beautiful way. Yeah.
I try to.
Mhm. Gonna go back to that imagining for just a moment, that there is a body which feels pretty at ease in this environment, and there's one that's like,
Mhm,
I'm checking it out. I'm not giving anybody anything because I'm not sure where I belong.
mhm.
What if you put them together? What if the person with the body with ease invited the other body to be in this space in the way you invite people in?
Hmm. I just had this visualization of like these two people sitting at the same table.
Mhm.
Um, I guess it would be a lot, it would allow for more range in
Mm.
how I see myself in this space.
Yes.
Um, but because I'm like, I guess I'm like thinking about how do I let the body that is always behind the scenes,
Mm.
like how do I let her just enjoy
Yes.
too and not be critical because I know how to host events and stuff. Like how do I just let her enjoy what's in front of her
Mhm.
without yeah, like without criticizing some
Right.
of this or without being too in tune about like, for example, who's going up on stage and who didn't follow,
Right.
you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's pretty difficult to separate our perspectives
Mm,
because the really skilled facilitator is always going to be there with you. And that gives you a bit of a critical eye for how events occur.
mhm.
If there's one piece that you would like to get out of the next socializing networking event, what would it be?
My desire is that I show up and I just enjoy it.
Mhm.
Like I just try to enjoy what's in front of me, what
Mhm.
these people have put in like so many hours of work for,
Mhm.
and a lot of effort has gone into it. Um, and try to look at it from like a place of like, oh, this is fun. And what I'm trying to get out of this event is just like to connect with somebody else, just one person.
One person. Okay.
Yeah, because that's how I see like success from an event. I'm like, oh, did I connect with one person?
Mhm.
I don't have to meet everybody. I'm not that kind of person. I don't like the whole like small talk, hop around to like 7,000 people. And at
Right.
the end, I'm like, where did all these business cards come from? I
Who are
just
those people?
yeah, I'm like, who are these people? Like, I just prefer to have one bestie. Like I made one friend at this thing.
Mhm.
Hmm.
One connection. Okay. From our conversation today, is there an action that you would like to take into your next networking event?
Feel like one, I have to find a networking event
Okay.
for sure.
Mhm.
And then two, I think it's like practicing just sitting down, like just sitting down and enjoying it.
Mm.
Um, and I'm like thinking about this thing that I do with my brain where I like try to reorient it to the present. And I'm like, I think that's another exercise for me to just like look for the positivity in the event, like what's going well
Mm.
instead of what is missing, or why is the food not out yet, you know?
Right.
And I think the other challenge for me is like not to go to the staff, because now that I'm aware that I do that as like a safety coping mechanism in these social events, that I challenge myself to either stay where I am
Mm-hmm.
or make a really good connection with somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
that's attending the event at my same like capacity.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. I think I heard it, but I'm going to ask, what did you learn about yourself in this brief conversation?
The most mind-blowing thing for me was that I go to the staff
Mm. Mm-hmm.
because that's where I feel safe and familiar. Yeah.
I just want to acknowledge they probably really appreciate it, Gina, because there's a cohesion there and they get to see that you know what's going on for them. So it probably is appreciated on that side as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure it is.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Anything else at this moment?
No,
Would
that's
it
it.
be
That was really nice.
okay? Good. Would it be all right if we paused our conversation here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you, Carol.
Oh, thank you, Gina. All right. Just invite everyone to come back.
Oh, I don't know about the space over where you all are physically, but I just feel like it's more expansive from where I'm sitting right now.
Yeah. Thank
Yeah,
you.
can I acknowledge one thing? Is that okay? Or
Of
is that in the
course.
is that it?
Yeah, no, we've got some
I
time.
just I just thought it was so lovely to hear the word, like the trust that you have in your body and your brilliance. I just wanted to acknowledge that because I felt a little bit of kind of faltering and I might not be, but the trust that you have in your body telling you the truth and in your brilliance and your power and you deciding to embrace that in that conversation, I thought was beautiful. So thank you. That was just amazing.
Yes, thank you, Gina.
Thank you all.
I do
Yeah.
want to open it up for questions or comments. Absolutely.
I just wanted to mention it was interesting that to watch sort of the conversation play out. And as she was saying things, I kept thinking of things too, like you did with the trees. And I was like, oh, it reminds me of meditation and this and this. And I just loved that instead it just like smoothly continued and there was like no competition for sharing. It was all about Gina and just sort of it felt like a guided meditation actually and just like it just smoothly went from like this and what do you feel about that and I don't know I love the way that just flowed.
Yeah, thank you. Christal, anything you'd like to add? Observation?
Um, I I want to thank Gina first of all. Thank you. That was the the authenticity that you showed up in and honoring yourself in that conversation. Thank you. I also um, want to point out a few things in how what Carol was doing in as she was coaching that are consistent with everything that we've been talking about. Was she was very clear on getting permission before she started, and she was also very not cautious but very clear. And we amongst ourselves, we have a phrase that we learned from an organization that we coach in. The words clear is kind. And one of the things that when we feel like we're in a kind space, then we can show up as well, right? And so Carol, all along the way, you were getting clarity without putting words in, without interpreting what Gina was saying into something else. You were just being very clear to make sure that you were still on the same page. And the way that it was wrapped up in what we talked about earlier and what we don't have enough time to get into today is how important the focus is, because without the ability to set the focus, without the ability for us to allow the person that we're talking with to set what they want to focus on in the conversation, that's how we get rambling, and that's how we can get caught up in stories, and everybody's been kind of referring to that. And that was very clear how you did that masterfully today in the conversation.
Yeah. It's those aspects that we talked about.
Mhm.
It's the listening that's so important, because that's the element of trust.
Mhm.
Going back to the very beginning of our conversation, and Colin and Christal and I have been talking about trust all month and what the importance of it. And we focus a lot on trust as a foundation of building community and relationships. But the interesting thing is that while I would love that Gina trusts me, and I thank you for putting your trust in me to have that conversation, Gina, it also is important for the person who is being the coach to trust that the person they're talking to has all they need.
Yeah.
That they have all the answers, that there's nothing that I need to fix or modify in any way, that it is my trust of them being a whole, complete, resourceful human being that allows the conversation to flow.
Yeah.
We really love engaging with people that way. It's a lot of what we do.
Yeah.
In our work.
Anyone else have any feedback or thoughts? Anything that you noticed or that struck you?
Wendy mentioned in the chat that it was beautiful to listen in on. So I just thought
It was, wasn't it?
highlight that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really was.
When I do coach training, we often work in a fishbowl like this. Thank you, Gina, for doing this, because it is often it's a little bit unnerving to know that there are other sets of eyes and ears that are on you. So thank you for your willingness to play full out.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's a really great place for us to, sadly, start to wind up our time together. um, and I just want to reiterate, Carol, something that you said, where you, and that was very clear in the conversation that you were having with Gina, that you were trusting that she was whole, and that her truth was the truth that you were sharing that space with her, right? That we're trusting that she's whole. And that's such an important aspect whenever we have a coaching conversation. It's not about fixing, it's not about providing any kind of advice unless people ask. Those are very specific times when we can give advice if we're asked, but you were very clear on how she was a whole person showing up to that conversation. And it's interesting because we did talk about, and in the PDF that we handed out, we talk about the steps of crisis, and it's not random that that was included. It's because a lot of conversations that we have are perpetuated by something that's a crisis. It could be cataclysmic, or it could be a crisis of thought. It could be a crisis in the moment. Like a crisis can be defined by many things, but this simple tool to first of all be able to focus on someone is going to, in and of itself, can help radically change and equip you with the ability to have different conversations with people in our leadership, in all our connections. I'm a parent, and the ability to be able to do this because I'm the parent of a teenager. So there you go, enough said right there. But the ability to be able to use this in all kinds of conversations has only enriched my actual relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the spirit of that, does anybody have any other questions about what we've talked about so far? There are no silly questions, by the way. That's the other thing that maybe we should have had that as a ticker tape that was going along the bottom. There are no silly questions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we just wanted, really, our purpose with this was twofold: to be able to hold space for people to learn how to have conversations. As you may know, we have a live podcast that we record every Tuesday. And every second Thursday. Tuesdays, we focus on teamwork and topics there. So if you have something that you would like us to actually be talking about in our live recordings, we would please please message us, submit any topics, and we will gladly do that. Every second Thursday, we also have special guests come in, and we focus on different topics every month. Aw, I'm so glad, Wendy. That's fantastic. Also, in the chat, before we wrap up, if you have a business, and I forgot to ask this at the top, feel free to put your LinkedIn and your business websites in the chat, or anything about you that you would like us to know. And if you don't know how to save the chat, there's a little hamburger menu, it should be on the bottom of the chat, for you to save any of that information. So please feel free to do that. Thank you, Wendy. Oh, Wendy's so good with her one-liner. So proud of you, Wendy. I've done some work with Wendy. So feel free to share your information there as well. Colin, can we get that last,
Yep.
the one slide? We debated whether we should
Sure,
have
sure.
slides, but we do have one slide, because we want to share something with you to let you know about something that is coming up. And we are sending out a recording after that you can refer to later. So if you want to get more information and watch watch Carol's conversation, Carol and Gina's conversation again. We operate in 3 ways. We are launching, and we're really excited about this, in April, at the end of April, we're launching something called a Certificate in Whole Human Leadership Essentials. So it's going to be a 6-session course. So there are obviously, we all have extensive coaching training and experience, but we have also distilled it down to what we believe are the essentials for people to learn how to coach as leaders. And that is going to be launching at the end of April. If you would like to be on the wait list for that to learn more about it, it's going to be a combination of individual study and then our live sessions, as well as some one-on-one mentorship sessions that we're rolling into it. You can find, you'll be getting an email with us with the information about how to get on the wait list and what to expect. The second thing we have is we actually have toolkits for teams. So we work with teams in this kind of a setting where we help them develop coaching skills for their leaders and for their team. If you'd like to know more about that, and we customize it according to what the organizations are, or if you know of an organization that we would be a good fit for, please feel free to either let them know about us or let us know about them. And the third thing that we do is we do work in one-on-one sessions. And if you want to know about what that looks like, we have a unique combination where you can request to work with one of us one-on-one. We also have times where we have clients that request to work with the 3 of us, and we call it center seat or 3-2-1 coaching sessions. It's not a hot seat, because that implies that you're like under the microscope. It's not like that at all. It actually just means that we are collectively working in a coaching setting with you, and they're a lot of fun as well. So if you want to find out more about any of those, please feel free to reach out to us, and definitely be following us on LinkedIn as well. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being a part of this session today. And again, I just want to say a special thank you to Gina for courageously taking that spot for us today. We really appreciate it. We are going to sign off now, but I would love to hear from everybody that's still here on the call, one thing that you were walking away with today as a result of our time together.
Honestly, just like Gina being able to share the way she shared and found a resolution was extremely inspirational to me. It's hard to say one thing, but just that. It was beautiful.
Thank you, Wendy.
I think for me, it was to slow down, take a breath, and just listen and wait and not cut in and not respond, because I do that.
Good takeaway.
I think I'm right there with Brittany as well. I like the space created around listening, and I think that's so important.
And mine is comfort zones.
Interesting.
Good to pay attention to. Great.
What about you, Colin? What are you leaving our conversation with today?
I go back to the conversation that Gina had, and the importance of listening to our bodies and to trust our bodies. That they're always telling us the story, right? So when, I heard of your discomfort and then the joy when you left that place, right? Your body is telling you something there, and it was so good to hear that. And then the idea of trusting your power, because when you spoke earlier about coming into a room as an African American and feeling out of place, and there's cliques and things like that, and you said, but wait, I am totally unique. If I embrace my power, that none of that matters. And I think that's just such a powerful reflection. So for me it was the trust from that conversation that really amplified the room for me. So thank you again. I know I already went on about it. It was so good.
It is pause, like the pause that we give to each other, that silence, that moment of being able to breathe.
Yeah. And I am walking away with what a privilege and gift it is to be able to share space with people and to connect at a level that we don't always get the chance to do that. So thank you. Thank you for showing up, and thank you for being a part of it. And we will be doing more sessions like this, and so keep your eyes out for that, and you'll be hearing from us shortly. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, take
Bye.
care.